Hello, Space Junkies, and welcome to episode 105 of What a Piece of Junk, the Star Wars podcast here on the Fandom Podcast Network. I am your host, Scott Botman, and joining me today is my inimitable co-host, Mr. Derrick Marsh. Derrick, how's it going?
Happy Friday.
Happy Friday! We are recording today in a slightly off-kilter moment for our usual schedule. It is 3 p.m. Eastern on a Friday afternoon, and we are recording the podcast during the daylight hours. Sadly, Mr. Miracle will not be with us today due to a death in the family, but we are still here to provide you with some expert analysis, or at least our analysis of Star Wars: The Bad Batch, episode number whatever that was.
Episode 5.
Episode 5 of season 2, Treasure Planet. So, yeah.
Well, but first we need to give Mr. Nathan Miracle a happy birthday.
We do,
Shout
yes.
out. So
That's right. Nathan is celebrating his birthday today, the day that we are recording. And so
his
we'll be
final year of his 30s.
That's right. We'll be sure to razz him about being 39 once he returns.
So, good stuff. So,
yeah. Well, Derrick, this week's episode of The Bad Batch was felt almost like another side quest, although there is great potential here for this to have been more important than we realized later on in the season, with the thing that they discovered on the eponymous Treasure Planet. There were a whole lot of connections to other adventure stories and Star Wars lore that I saw. It's not my favorite episode by any means, but I had a good time with it. I don't know. What did you overall think about it?
I think the Bad Batch got off easy because they didn't have to travel to the Lonely Mountain on foot. They got to go there by spaceship.
Right?
They battled a dragon, but they didn't really battle a dragon because he was very small, and Wrecker basically threw him out the window. And
Yeah.
the third, they didn't have to fight 4 other armies for a battle of 5 armies in order to
Yeah.
keep the heart of the lonely, the heart of the mountain. So
Yeah, it very much was a lot of Lord of the Rings atmosphere going on here. Or honestly, one of the things that I thought the entire time was I should adapt this for a Spelljammer adventure in Dungeons and Dragons, because this is absolutely Spelljammer for D&D. Go to a planet looking for a treasure, fight the Guardian, get the magic item, do the thing, and then at the end it all blows up.
yeah, we can't keep the treasure either. So
Yeah.
well, it definitely felt homage to Indiana Jones. So I'm
Yes.
wondering if this was kind of the tribute for Indiana Jones 5 coming out later this year. I also got the Neon Genesis Evangelion vibes going on there with the Titans and all the mechs type deal stuff there.
Yeah.
Some people have also talked about Pokemon, and ironically enough, the beast that I'm fighting in Zelda Breath of the Wild for the Nintendo Switch that I got for Christmas is just like us.
Yes,
So
yes. I was thinking about. Well, you know what? I'll get there when we talk about the connections to the rest of the Star Wars galaxy. But I think I almost heard a little bit of Indiana Jones music
it
sprinkled in
did.
the background. Yeah.
hmm Yeah, it was definitely there. I think this was an ode to George Lucas and Steven Spielberg from Filoni. So, but
Yeah.
it was definitely. I mean, overall though, I mean, I thought the episode was fun. I mean, I enjoyed it. It didn't seem quite pretty quick paced, right? It didn't really have any slow moments. It was more of a episode for what is it, Fee, Wakanda Sykes
Yeah. Yeah. Wanda
character.
Sykes. Wanda Sykes.
Yeah.
Fee. Yep.
Yep. So it was more of that, felt like, because we hadn't really gotten anything other than kind of her hanging out at Sid's bar a couple of times. But overall, though, I thought it was a fun episode, but I didn't think it was, as you mentioned, it was another side quest, but it really didn't lack, or it really lacked anything else pertaining to the whole story. Maybe the universe, it's a little bit bigger, right? Because now you have something else. But
Right.
outside of that, there was no character development, unlike the last episode where we got a bit more with Tech, right, and his moment to shine. This really wasn't like any particular thing. I mean, unless, if you, like I said, it was just meant to be for Wanda Sykes' character, and it's like,
Right.
okay, then I guess. But then really, she didn't do much of anything other than, I felt like Omega solved most of the mysteries, and then when anything happened, she saved Wrecker and she got the heart of the mountain, but then she had to be saved quite a few times too. So
Yeah. Yeah, she was definitely making it up as she went along.
Yeah.
And like you said, maybe that was the whole point, was for us to realize that, she's all hat and no cattle. Perhaps
Hmm.
she's less a pirate and treasure hunter and more just con man,
Yeah.
con woman.
So
Okay, well
and
let's jump on into the questions then. What did you like most about this episode?
like I said, I thought it was just, overall a fun episode. I mean, I would probably say my favorite thing was probably ended up being the Titan or whatever you want to call it,
Hmm.
right? So that was just kind of cool because, what does it play into overall? It wasn't just Jedi, right? Because that's what
Right.
everybody thinks, right? Every time we go to a secret temple from olden days, it's the Jedi or Sith, right? So it was nice that it wasn't that, and that it was some other, alien race or society that developed this, mega weapon.
Yeah, yeah. For me, it was the thing that I liked the most. Well, I would say about the temple deal, definitely a connection to Star Wars: The Old Republic video game for me, because that's one
Hmm.
of my favorite eras of Star Wars. So I'll talk about that again in a few minutes here. But um, what I liked most about the episode was when Omega had the compass. So I enjoyed that we had the compass thing, and they were able to realize that it involved blacklight stuff as well, that it wasn't
Hmm.
just a detector, but it was the little lens deal. Big time vibe from Star Wars The Force Awakens there, where we were looking for the map to Luke Skywalker. And then also prior
Raiders
to
of the
that,
Lost Ark to me.
yeah, Raiders of the Lost Ark, and other Star Wars stories, there's a compass thing that Luke has to get in. I want to say this was Star Wars Battlefront. I think that's or maybe it was Battlefront 2. Anyway,
Mhm,
there's a compass that he has to find, and then that compass is a bit of an Easter egg in The Last Jedi, because you see it on the shelf in Luke's hut when he's there on Ahch-To.
mhm,
And I think there may have been an idea to have that be a more important point of the storyline, but that ended up on the cutting room floor for whatever reason for The Last Jedi. Um, but yeah, I really liked that when Omega looked through the compass, she could see the almost like blacklight clues,
mhm.
within the tomb or the temple there. So I'm glad Nathan's not on this episode, because I'm going to incorporate the whole idea of blacklight clues into a D&D puzzle someday in the future. Now, I'm sure he's going to listen to this episode,
Yes,
but
I was gonna
hopefully,
say, sure, he's gonna listen to it.
yeah, yeah, but hopefully he'll forget about it by the time I incorporate it, or he'll do he's actually pretty good about using knowledge that he knows versus knowledge that his character would know in D&D,
Mhm.
and not, metagaming. But we'll see. But I just love that idea. It's very much an almost a 1980s adventure movie trope,
Mhm.
where you've got the blacklight thing going and you're like, "Oh, but did you hold the Declaration of Independence over an open flame to check for stuff written with lemon juice?"
Yes.
Right?
I mean, it definitely was, right? Every puzzle, they had to turn things around. Like I said,
Yeah.
I feel like like I said, it was funny that right now doing the one of the champion things for Zelda Breath of the Wild. It's pretty funny that it's almost exactly the same. So
Yeah, I love that about Breath of the Wild. It has the classic idea of ancient aliens, or the orange sun,
yeah,
as
the
it were.
Shakia.
Yeah, because basically the idea that, we all think that we're slowly but surely discovering and advancing things, and then we find some ancient tomb and you're like, "Oh gosh, the people from 10,000 years ago were like millions of years more advanced than us," but their
But then they wipe
civilizations were
themselves
lost.
out.
Yeah, exactly. Their civilizations were lost and everything got bombed back to the Stone Age, which is actually a Star Wars standard operating procedure. Because if you look at stuff that was happening in Star Wars: The Old Republic, or then in the High Republic era that they are now exploring in literature, um, they're way more advanced. And we sometimes look at the stuff from Naboo in the Phantom Menace, and we're like, "Gosh, this stuff looks better than the things from episodes 4, 5, and 6." And the answer, of course, is, well, yeah, because the stuff we saw on Naboo is pre-Clone Wars. Then the Clone Wars happen, and the whole galaxy gets blowed up again and just
Hmm.
wrecked shop everywhere. Um, so yeah, that was in keeping with the idea, and I loved the blacklight clues. That's got to be my favorite part.
Hmm.
Okay, so what did you dislike most about the episode?
Man, they done my cooler droid dirty on this one, man. So I thought he was gonna make it, and then nope, he just got blown up. So They didn't
And
even revisit it that like, oh, let's pour one for our homie here,
and even worse for Mel is, Fee was just like, no big deal. I have a backup copy of his file on my ship, and I'll just build him a new body. Like, wow, it is certainly a far cry from Lando and L337 in Solo when he
Yes.
was like weeping over the death of the droid, even though he too apparently had the whole backup copy. I'm going to hook her Cortex to the Millennium Falcon thing. So I
Well, I
don't know,
thought they took her head and put it. He hooked it up. I
maybe
thought
so.
that was during Solo. He took it and that was the only way he could save her was by
Yeah,
transferring her consciousness, apparently, consciousness
right.
into the Falcon. So
But yeah, it's very funny how she's the polar opposite of Lando and
yeah,
L337.
eh. So
Yeah, Mel got blowed up. Big deal. Happens every week.
yeah,
Also,
so
further proof that she's a terrible pirate because she
her
can't even
crew
manage
keeps.
a
That's
droid.
why she hires robots because they
That's
keep the
right.
droids. She can replace them, I guess.
Yeah,
So
yeah, good times.
yours.
Um, I disliked that this is gonna make me sound like an old man, but so be it. It was dark, and I don't mean gritty. I mean, like, every so often, I was all, "What is happening in this episode? I cannot tell what's going on. Everything is so dark in this ancient
It's the
tomb."
Batman, right? So
Yeah, it's like, I get it. It's supposed to be dark, but come on, work with me here, animator people. I need to see something. And
yeah,
this isn't the first time that I've had this complaint about the Bad Batch. During the episode last season where they were
yeah.
doing that thing where they're on the mining car and all those bat monsters are below them
Hmm.
as they're going from one end of the city to the other, like in the secret tunnel. Most of the time, it was all we can barely see our heroes' faces, and that's it.
Hmm.
They had like one or two flashlights, and I was like, "Come on, you guys! You can't save money on the animation budget just by making everything happen in the dark."
There you go. Game of Thrones season 8.
Oh gosh, yes. Okay, all right. Question 3: what connections did you draw to the rest of the Star Wars galaxy?
So I like this one. I don't have the original. I just saw it on Reddit when I was reading up on some stuff today about it. That it was, and actually, I think it might have been a CBR.com post or article as well, because the whole thing that having these Titans or whatever you want to call them out there, these obviously Palpatine hadn't realized that these were out there at some point, I imagine, right?
Mhm.
And I feel like this would have been perfect propaganda for him to tell everyone this is why we need a Death Star,
Oh,
because I
yeah.
need to be able to protect people from this kind of stuff, right? But at the same time, being able to just blow somebody up because they disagree with you about, pineapple on pizza. And
Yes.
that one there's for Kevin Reitzel. So we'll see if he listens. But yeah, no, just in that I thought was pretty funny. In the overall storyline of like, yeah, you could use this as propaganda, So, and then how many more are out there, right? If this was just a one-time thing where, like I said, somebody traveling saw this and escaped, the clutches, and they became, stories into myths, into legends type deal stuff, right?
Mhm.
And then the people just ended up destroying themselves. But it also, I would think that it can't be that old, because I mean, unless if it was the way the power of the machine worked, but it's like they've revisited that planet and it's like, yeah, this place has been destroyed, which obviously was done from the Titan. But at the same time, like if that was done thousands of years ago, I would have think the planet would have quote unquote healed itself by then, right? Something would have overtaken it. Not necessarily, but at least, I mean, it could take, millenniums more than what they're talking about here for the planet, but for it wasn't doing enough damage to me, in my opinion, that wouldn't be any different than like a volcano or something where after maybe 1,000 years there
Mhm.
it would have been all regrown and stuff. So this had to be at least something more recent within the past couple of 100 years.
Yeah, I so my big connection is the Star Wars: The Old Republic. This droid monster thingy looks like one of the robot droids that was used in the Isotope 5 storyline on the planet of Makeb for that video game. But but further on your point about this couldn't have happened that long ago, I didn't take it that this particular Titan destroyed the whole planet. I thought that it was like a war of the Titans, and this was the only one left. And so there had been like dozens or maybe even hundreds of these things stomping across the surface of this world, and that's why it's all decimated or desolate. even to this day, and that some of the ones that were there had even more powerful weapons than what this thing had. And so they just like scoured the surface of the planet, which is why it never recovered. And maybe even that some of their weaponry used radiation, which, will render someplace uninhabitable for thousands of years,
Well, I mean, and that could be right. I mean, like I said, there could be multiple, but I would have thought you would have. I don't know. To me, if the things were metal, like it would got buried, right?
Mhm.
So it activated it. So, but like, what covered it then, right? Over all this time. I mean,
Yeah, it
because
was
if if
right.
the planet was vacant at this point, so I don't know. Like I said, it seemed like it just left a lot of unanswered questions, right? What
Sure.
was it? Was it like you said, was it a civil war? A planet war? Was it just a one time deal thing, and that was how they deactivated it because they felt it was too powerful? Something like that to me. I don't know, right? It could be a lot of things, but like I said, it just felt like for what was shown and what we saw was just the one and not like pieces of it scattered everywhere else, which could be right. I don't know.
Yeah.
I just felt like it's like this has to be more recent rather than thousands and thousands of years ago, pre doing the Republic and the Jedi, in my
Yeah.
opinion.
Alternatively, though, we maybe the planet is healing, and we didn't see that part of it because I mean,
Maybe.
Lizard Guy had to come from somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, there could be plenty of stuff that. Well, and the thing was interesting too. Like, did it dig tunnels into the hull of the machine too? That was what I was a little confused
Oh, I
about
think he
too.
was coming through to grab Wrecker through
There was a
some.
holes he dug.
There were holes, but then I think the robot thing, the Titan, had various holes in it too,
Maybe,
and I
yeah,
think he was reaching through there. It
maybe.
was fun to watch Wrecker fight him because the big lizard coming down and trying to grab you and being impervious to blaster fire because you're such a beefy creature. That was another callback to other Star Wars stories to me. Is
Everything is
Yeah,
immune
almost
to
everything that's wildlife is all like blasters. Yeah, like the Rancor, it can just shrug them off,
the
and
Sarlacc. Well, I mean, I guess the Sarlacc's like the one little tongue things weren't immune
yeah.
to it, but the rest of the
But the
tentacles
rest of the
were.
Sarlacc, it was just like, meh, no big deal. And of course, the
Yeah,
Crate Dragon in Mando
yeah,
was all like
yeah.
blasters.
And then I
Yeah,
don't know about a Wampa. The only thing the Wampa I know wasn't immune to was the lightsaber, but
yeah.
we don't know
But
about
the one thing
blasters.
we've learned about Star Wars is very few things are immune to lightsabers. I mean,
Yes,
it's a big deal that Beskar is. Old school lore, Cortosis was, but almost everything else can be cut through by a lightsaber given enough time and technique, as Qui Gon Jinn showed us on the droid control ship in
yes.
Phantom Menace. Wah 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 wah.
But yeah, like I said, I agree with you. There's overall connections, opportunities with that. But I think obviously it opens up a whole opportunity for
hmm hmm
prequel stuff like
Yeah, yeah.
beyond original trilogy, but
I'm
old
still
Republic
hoping
times.
I'm still hoping someday we get an Old Republic TV show or movie of some kind. Yeah. So
Maybe
that
maybe Filoni will go down that route because they won't do a live action, so maybe we'll get an animated form.
Yeah, that would be cool. So that brings us to question 4. So customized questions for this episode. What the force was that giant robot dinosaur thing? And so my personal theory is that it is similar to an Isotope 5 robot from Star Wars The Old Republic, where you take a battle droid or tank droid and you soup him up to give him arms and legs with blasters bristling in almost every direction. And then you power him with this incredible radioactive compound called Isotope 5 that was drilled out of the core of the planet Makeb thousands and thousands of years before Episode 4 occurred. And so, Derek, as you may recall from those levels in the first expansion set for Star Wars The Old Republic MMO, Rise of the Hutt Cartel, the Hutt Cartel takes over the supply of Isotope 5 on Makeb and starts making super awesome weapons and armor and whatnot and trying to conquer the galaxy because apparently that's what you do when you're a Hutt or anybody else that has a super weapon in Star Wars.
Well, yeah, and then didn't they create like a mini mech was one of the raid bosses too from that?
Yep.
So
Yeah.
you had to do that and dodge the fire and everything else
Yeah,
like you
you
do
kinda
in
had to fight
MMOs.
yeah, you kinda had to fight a big robot like this thing in this episode of the
Not
Bad Batch.
quite as big as that
Not
one,
quite
but
as large, right, but a
yeah,
similar design with the quadrupedal and the big head on the neck and
yeah.
the giant turbo lasers at the top of the head, pew, 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 pew.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So I mean, it definitely makes it a raid boss. That's for sure. So
Yes. So, I mean, do you have a theory about it being something else, that it wasn't a droid, but maybe just a vehicle?
I don't think it was a um a AI type deal thing. I think it was designed for one thing, and
Mhm.
that was basically destruction. Because like as soon as it woke up, it started. Now, granted, that could have been like you said, it had been slept for thousands of years or whatever, and the last thing it knows was blowing up. But there wasn't anything on it, so to me, it was meant for one thing, and like it wasn't even like it was just destroying everything. Like
Yeah,
even the ship, like the ship didn't have anything on it that was like a life form that would even want to detect it, right? And obviously it destroyed the robot, so it doesn't care for anything that's
yeah.
even, non-artificial. So I don't know. So I
I
think,
was
like I said,
curious as
something
to
else as a weapon, but that's about it.
whether it was attacking, the droid Mel because he was moving. Like, it was almost like a
A
T-Rex,
T-Rex.
movement.
Yeah,
You
but
know?
then why would it go for the ship though? That was the thing, because the ship was just sitting there. It's not like anybody was on the ship like, oh no,
Yeah.
we got to save Omega or Tech or
Right,
Echo on the ship, right?
right,
So
right. Yeah,
so, and I mean, the planet was pretty desertless, or whatever, apocalyptic, if you want to
yeah,
say. And then even like with the way the moon or the sun, however it was, the way they were, doing it with the whatever it was supposed to be, giving them some light when they were on the planet. I mean, I don't know, it just felt weird because, like I said, there wasn't anything like an unscripted story or like a hologram, that gave us something, right, about the backstory of what it was. So
yeah. I also thought that perhaps when Fee put it into the thing, yeah, and turned the heart of the mountain into locked it
to
into
pull it
place.
out.
Well, no, when she locked it into place the first time, when they got up to the control room, I was wondering if maybe she just put it in the wrong slot.
Combination.
Yeah, like she put it in kill mode, and if you had put it in the other side, it would have been in, I don't know,
Peace
barbecue
mode.
mode. Yeah, barbecue pizza mode. Here you go, guys. I'm a giant pizza oven.
Yeah. No, I mean, possibly. Like I said, there's obviously just raises more questions than not, right? It was like, okay, this is cool. It's a giant, mech Pokemon, but now what else are we gonna do? So
Mew 3, rock and roll.
yeah.
All right, question number 5. Take it away, Derek.
Yeah, so my question for this, and we've kind of touched about this a little bit last time, but now my question is, how many side quest episodes will we get this season? Over under is 3. So we've had 2, episode
Yeah,
4 and 5. We're gonna get 12 episodes, right?
I think that's right.
So that means out of the next what, 8? No, 7 episodes, right? Am I doing, yeah, 7. 7 episodes. That means we'll get 2 more side quests, or the next 7 are all going to be main story.
Yeah. Okay, so
What's your
no.
over under on it?
So according to our friends at the Google machine, the Bad Batch season 2 is 16 episodes.
So even
So
more chance then. Okay.
yeah, I'm gonna say 6 side quest episodes.
Oh,
Yeah. So
so
that'll leave us with 10 main episodes, and I consider 1, 2, and 3 to have been main storyline episodes.
yeah. I would definitely. I mean, the first part of episode 1, obviously with them with the crab guys and stuff like that, the first 5 minutes, but it wasn't
Yeah,
anything for the
yeah.
entire
Crab
episode.
battle!
So yeah, so episode 1, 2, and 3, definitely, yes, main storyline. So that's where I was saying episode 4 and 5, at least at this point. I mean, they could retcon an episode, right, if there's something that ties to the main storyline, that makes 4 or 5, related to the main storyline. But at this point, I would say, yeah, we're 3 episodes main, 2 side quests. So you think we'll get 6 out of 16? Okay,
Yeah, yeah,
so
that's my
over
prediction.
3.
Yeah,
So
over 3 for sure. Yeah, definitely.
if that changes it to 16 episodes, then I probably should have raised it to 4. But you still would have picked it. So
Yeah.
I'm gonna pick 4. I will say a quarter of the episodes this season will be side quests.
Okay. Yep. That seems plausible. All right, cool. Well, we're going to take a short break so you can hear about the other shows here on the FPN, and then come back for one little piece of Star Wars news before we're out for this particular episode.
Thank you for listening. We hope you're enjoying this podcast. Here are the other great shows on the Fandom Podcast Network. Culture Clash, where we discuss the latest in entertainment and pop culture. Blood of Kings, our show covering the entire Highlander universe. Couch Potato Theater, we celebrate our favorite movies. And Time Warp, our fandom flashback show discussing a year in movies and our favorite retro movie, TV, and pop culture topics. Good evening, discussing all things Alfred Hitchcock. Hair Metal Podcast. We cover the rock metal music of the 80s and early 90s. Type 40, a Doctor Who podcast discussing the time-traveling Doctor Who universe. Lethal Mullet, an action film podcast covering the 80s, 90s, and beyond. Also, check out the Lethal Mullet Network for more great podcasts. What a Piece of Junk, our Star Wars podcast. Making Treks, a Star Trek podcast with a deep dive into the final frontier. The Fandom Show, our Fandom Podcast Network live YouTube show discussing the hottest topics in fandom. The True Believers MCU podcast discussing the Marvel Cinematic and Television Universe. Union Federation, our Star Trek and the Orville Show. And we're proud to welcome the BQN Network to the Fandom Podcast Network. Please visit our friends on the BQN Network, a Star Trek Universe podcast that also includes your favorite topics, movies, history, superheroes, and more. You can find the Fandom Podcast Network on YouTube. The Fandom Podcast Network is also on all major podcast platforms. The Fandom Podcast Network audio master feed is on Podbean at fpnet.podbean.com. You can find the Fandom Podcast Network on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. You can email us at fandompodcastnetwork@gmail.com. Thank you so much for listening, and remember, respect others and enjoy your fandom.
All right, great. Thanks, Kevin. Well, we got two little pieces of Star Wars news to talk about on this episode. Not a whole lot happening in the galaxy far, far away right here in this week, but we did get an interview that came out with Rolling Stone from one Daisy Ridley. And of course, for the rest of her life, people will be asking her about what it was like to play Rey and various Star Wars questions. And so one of the things that came out in this interview was Daisy saying that a lot of fans took umbrage with Rian Johnson doing his reveal in The Last Jedi about Rey's parents were nobodies. Of course, that itself got retconned in The Rise of Skywalker, where it turned out they were somewhat important, being related to Palpatine and all. But she is telling Rolling Stone here that the idea that Rey's parents were nobodies actually started with J.J. Abrams in The Force Awakens. She says, well, J.J. was the one who was like, she is of no one. So it wasn't just The Last Jedi where that was the message. Derrick, I feel like we've heard her say something really close to this before, or if not her, then fans have extrapolated the idea from The Force Awakens that he was leading into that pathway when Rian Johnson took over for The Last Jedi. Of course, the the interviewer tries to nail down Daisy herself, and she's always very good about not taking one side or the other over the whole Rey's parents are important, Rey's parents are nobodies, which version of the story was better. Um, and I always thought that the best way to take this is that this was yet another challenge she had to overcome. That the whole "your parents are nobodies" was to test her mettle as to whether she wanted to keep trying to do the right thing, or if she was going to accept what Kylo Ren said, where they sold her off for drinking money. Um, does this interview from Rolling Stone change any of the storyline for you there?
Not really, because let's be honest, one, they didn't, even though it might have started with J.J. Abrams in episode 7, they still didn't actually have a full 3-part story developed anyways at that time. Had it been, this is what it's going to be, then JJ leaves, then they do, Rian Johnson, and then that pisses off half the Star Wars fans, and then so they decide to scratch it and to go into it, then that's possibly, but there wasn't, I mean, there's no way to really say one way or another. I'm fine. I mean, obviously, I think both versions can be fine, right? Because I think
Hmm.
to one point, I mean, we obviously, the whole Mary Sue thing and the way that adapted into after that, but and what we use it in popular culture now. But overall, I mean, I think that version would have been like, okay, you might not be quote unquote, the genetics or whatever to be somebody special or born into this, heritage or whatever of a family, but you could still do great things. And then the other version of, well, you're the, child of a, vicious tyrant, evil person, and you don't have to grow up to be your parents. Right.
Right, right.
So it doesn't really matter. No, I think either message is still can be spin positive. And so it's just the way they did it. It's just, like I said, it's just a shame because there is back and forth and people want to argue it just to make it, because like I said, they are so criticized that they are that people are going to nitpick whatever and be like, well, this, but then the same people would have complained about it regardless anyways. So
True, true. I always feel that the sequel trilogy would have been better than it was if JJ had really been in charge for all three movies, even behind the scenes, you know. And I think that he felt that way too, which is part of the reason why he ended up leaving between 7 and 8. And then everything went so crazy, and the
well,
situation
I
with
thought initially they had signed him on for all 3
like,
episodes anyways.
yeah, they
And
did.
then he
And
wanted
he felt
he
like he didn't have enough control over it.
Oh, well, yeah, because Kathleen Kennedy's a
Mhm.
bad person when it came to that person.
And,
So luckily
and then
she
also
released all that, but
he bucked at the idea of the story group. Like, you know, he didn't want a committee telling him about stuff. You know what I mean?
well,
So, which I
yeah.
could totally understand as someone who is a writer. If I'm wanting to write a story, it's going to be hard to write it by committee. I think the story group might be one of the things that gets excised fairly soon in Star Wars. Um, we all know that Kathleen Kennedy has been talking about retiring for quite some time, and I think when she retires, the person who takes over for her might get rid of the story group.
Well, but see, I disagree. I don't like that because if you look at like the cohesiveness of everything, to me, it has to be. If you're going to have all these pieces connecting it, because then there could have been somebody in the background that would have said, "Hey, let's not do this," right? And at the same time, somebody would have been like,
Yeah,
"Yeah,
that's
but I think we
true.
should do it this way." And then at the same time, you would have had that one person that has all the Star Wars nerdism notes and everything, and says,
Hmm.
"We can't do this or we can do this because it is in the written book of Star Wars canon," right?
Yeah.
And I'm not saying it you don't want people out there to be adventurous with stuff, but there's just, like I said, some of those fundamentals I felt like that even though 1, 2, and 3 weren't perfect, they still held to that. Now,
Hmm.
like I said, the whole metachlorians and all that, they just would have left that out in Jar Jar Binks. I think episode 1, 2, and 3, and obviously the dialogue in 2 could have been a little bit better. But outside of that, they're not like bad Star Wars movies,
Yeah.
in general, right? They still felt Star Warsy. Again, I think where 6, 7, 8, and 9 fell apart was they just tried to do too much. They tried
Mm.
to bring this new generation because that's what Disney wanted to do. They said, screw all you people that have been following Star Wars for the past 30, 40 years.
Well,
Screw
I don't
you.
know
We're going to do our
if
own
they
thing.
if they
That's
wanted to
that's
do
what they
that.
did.
If they wanted to do that hardcore, though, they wouldn't have bothered to have, you know, Harrison Ford, Mark Hamill,
No,
and Carrie
they
Fisher show
had
up.
to do that because that had to be the passing of the torch, but they didn't do it the right way. They just basically made the main characters side characters. Again, what they should have done is 7, 8, 9 should have been our final hurrah with our main cast, and our new people should have been the subplot. And
Mm.
they should have been the ones that learned from them, because then it would be like, okay, here's the passing of the torch, right? You could have gotten the passing of whatever for Finn in episode 7. You could have gotten the passing of Poe in episode 8, and then you could have gotten the climactic passing of the Jedi from Luke to Rey in episode 9, which would have put it all together. And to me, that's what it should have been. And then you could have had this whole thing lined up for episode 10, 11, and 12, which is
Mhm.
now no more main cast. They either died off in the end of 7, 8, 9, or, at the different points or whatever. And then you could have literally had the next, 2 to 3 trilogies written for that with
Yeah.
10, 11, 12, or whatever new Ray Poe Finn trilogy you would have started from that. That's how
Yeah.
it
Although
been,
it appears now that we'll never get an episode 10,
in
11,
my
or 12.
opinion.
Although never say never, right? I mean, I would not have expected a 7, 8, and 9. So, you know.
Again, there's a couple of side things you could do. Again, it's going to take 15, 20 years, unfortunately, because
Mhm.
people are so pissed off it that you're going to have to basically, you either had to reboot it entirely, which they're not going to do because that would retcon everything.
Yeah.
Plus, unfortunately, Harrison Ford doesn't want to do anything with it, and Carrie Fisher passed away.
Right.
So, and at this point, I mean, obviously they're trying to do justice with Mark Hamill, and what we've been able to get with Mando and Book of Boba Fett, with him coming into those episodes as Luke Skywalker. But I mean, again, it's the harm is too late and all that stuff. And again, we can have discussions. And I'm not saying, again, 7, 8, 9 were necessarily bad movies in themselves if they
Right.
weren't Star Wars movies. Right? If they would have been something else, then and the ties to it. And again, I just think one cohesive person and story written, because again, I think you look at episode 4, 5, and 6, it's not all the same director.
Right.
that made them, but they were all one story written by one person. And then when
Yes.
5 and 6 came around, there was tweaks and things that director worked with Lucas as the initial writer, and that's where they came together and made it, right? And that to me would have been what they could have done with Abram, right? Okay, make 7, 8, 9, write it all into one story, and then let's nitpick it, right? But they could have had then Ryan Johnson come in at 8 and kind of done some different things with Abrams being, an executive producer or whatever, whatever. And then same thing with 9, had somebody else completely different, right? And I think that could have been fine. Like I said, they could have approached it 2 or 3 different ways. This is the way we get it, so it is what it is. And some people will never touch the sequel trilogy. Others, like myself, if they're going to make something, like, I think the potential is a Rogue Squadron series
Yeah.
with Poe as basically the Wedge Antilles. We get that version of Rogue Squadron as a series on Disney Plus or whatever version they want to do, I think has good potential, because then that plays the Clone Wars, what Clone Wars did for the prequel trilogy, right? And I think that's
Yeah.
what we need. So
I think going forward, there is plenty of storytelling they can do in the sequel era, and I think that's what we'll get. We'll get at least one more movie out of it. I think. I'm still holding out hope or predicting that at Star Wars Celebration this year, Daisy Ridley will be there for them to announce the Damon Lindelof film as the next film, and it'll be something involving Rey post Episode 9, um, because Daisy's been doing some media stuff recently for no particular reason. I mean, she's not super busy, and she went to Skywalker Ranch late last year, uh, telling everybody it was just to have lunch and catch up with friends. Well, that's not. She's not going all the way to California just to have lunch and catch up with friends, especially not at a corporate center.
yeah.
So I expect that something's going to be happening sometime soon, and Celebration this year will probably be the perfect time to announce it. Then they start filming it next year, and it comes out in like 26, 25 or 26.
Well, I'm still with everyone else. Don't announce anything until you actually have it filmed, like part of the footage, and show that. So
Yeah,
I'd rather,
and
again, hold off. No movie
I hope
announcements
they
this
stick to
year.
that. Yeah,
And then do it in 2024. And then, like I said, but we're already but it's already half shot. We're ready to do it in 2025.
yeah,
So,
yeah. And hey, maybe that's what's happened, and they shot the pieces of it in secrecy. Who knows?
I mean, the only other thing which would really suck, because it's 4 more years, but if they want to wait till 2027, it's the 50th anniversary, as we talked about,
Hmm.
that could be the next movie. So there's
Yeah,
a chance they could announce it this year, and then, but I don't think they will, because it's also in the UK, which is Daisy Ridley's home. So maybe, I don't know.
yeah.
So we'll see. So
All right. Well, anyway, but yeah. So one more piece of Star Wars news this week. One of the characters from Andor is not going to return for season 2. Has been officially confirmed by the actor in question. And Derek, who is the guy that's not coming back?
Linus Musk, or Mosk, I should say, which was Cyril's handyman henchman, right? The sergeant guy. So Alex Fern has confirmed on social media that his character is not returning in season 2, which isn't surprising at the same time, because I mean, he was abolished off to whatever mining working colony he was
Yeah,
on there, where
yeah,
he relayed that information to Cyril, right, about Andor and all that stuff. So maybe he wasn't as, maybe he's content working that, unlike Andor, who got sent to prison and had to break out, right? So, but I guess at this point it is confirmed that we will not see Mosk again. So,
yeah. And yeah, over on Twitter, Alex Ferns says he thought it would be the case that maybe Mosk was going to become a rebel and join the rebellion, but he says, "Alas, you have seen the end of Mosk. I had a blast playing him, and I'm glad you and others enjoyed him too. Au revoir." So yeah, so no,
unless we get a
sorry,
season 3.
unless we get a season 3, yeah, which is possible. But then, of course, also there's a chance that Mosk as a character could show up in some other story someday, but that seems pretty unlikely.
Or maybe a
He
video
was
game.
Maybe a video game. Yeah, that would be true. Or of course, they could easily do some Star Wars and/or comic books that were set prior to some of the stuff, or in between, stories on the series there. So we could see him again in some form, but likely not played by this dude.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, time for Derek's favorite part of the show. What Star Wars T-shirts are we wearing this episode? I decided to give a little bit of an homage to Andor and had my Rogue One shirt that has
Very
Cassian
nice.
and K2 and all of those guys hanging out on my shirt with the U Wings flying behind them. And it just says, "May the Force be with us," because they knew that it was a doomed mission, almost like the Dirty Dozen or, a Suicide Squad trope there. Derek, what do you got on?
So I got two things. First thing I'm wearing is an homage to Nathan for his birthday.
Oh, cute. It is Chibi Chewbacca with some Chibi Ewoks hanging out with him. Good
Yes, but then
times.
I picked this up at Hobby Lobby this past week because they had their spring stuff on 40-50% sale. I can't remember, but it was on sale. So I had to pick it up. I have to slip back a little bit so I can show you.
Oh gosh, this must be a large thing. It is a large thing. Oh wow, yeah, it is a painting of Boba Fett firing his blaster to the left-hand side, and in his very much Empire Strikes Back era armor with the beat-up helmet and whatnot, but not quite as dark of an armor, and not quite as shall we say girthy Boba
Yeah, I was gonna
Fett
say
as
not as
he
much as
was.
Sarlacc as saliva all over it. So
That's right. He's not quite the dad bod Boba Fett that he was in the Book of
yeah,
Boba Fett.
it
So
does
yeah,
look like though the way the background is that it is one of the shots from Return of the Jedi though the way the background
okay.
with the light is, so it looks like it would be from out in the sands, right? Because
Somewhere
it's a
in
lighter
Tatooine. Yeah.
pastel background, right?
Yeah, and his armor, his Beskar is in pretty bad shape, so the paint's chipping everywhere. So it hasn't been, refurbished like it was in the Book of Boba Fett.
Yep. So
Well, if you guys want to get your own cool "What a Piece of Junk" T-shirt, or I guess wall hanging like that, maybe I don't even know, pillow, mouse pad, whatever, please check out the T Public store for all of the Fandom Podcast Network. So just head over to tpublic.com and search up Fandom Podcast Network, and you can find all sorts of merchandise. Derek, let folks know where they can find the show out there on the internet, please.
So the big place that we like to promote is obviously from the fpnet.podbean.com, which is the master feed on the Podbean app. But again, you can go anywhere that you can download Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Google Play, anywhere you can do podcasts. Big thing too is when you go to those podcast places and download or stream us, please leave a review, a like it, or whatever we can, because again, that just helps promote our show here, What a Piece of Junk, which we do for fun. Again, there isn't anything that we do out of here that's going to make us a ton of money so we can retire and just become social media content creators. But it does keep the lights on for all the stuff that Kyle and Kevin and any of the other contributors for the FPNet the overall group network group keep things going for them. Same thing with the T Public store, right? Anything helps. But you can also find us on other social media platforms. Obviously, the Facebook group is What a Piece of Junk, a Star Wars podcast, which I oversee. The email is What a Piece of Junk pod@gmail.com, which you run, as
Mhm.
well as the Twitter account at What Wars, and then Instagram, which is the Fandom Podcast Network, which Kyle runs. So
Yeah, and we hope that you will take a moment to leave a review for us on Apple Podcasts. We'd love those 5-star reviews, but be honest. Give us whatever feedback you think we deserve. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 stars. Any 5-star review helps because it can help other listeners to find the show in their list of recommended Star Wars content. And also, if we don't get enough good reviews, the Wookiees get angry with us, and you do not want to upset the Wookiee.
nope.
Not at all. So, yeah, we want to thank you all for joining us this episode. Please hit us up on social media between shows to let us know what we can do to improve, what you like, what you dislike, what you want us to add, what you want us to take away. And we please want to remind you to always respect each other and always respect each other's fandom. Well, Nathan's not here, so I'm going to have to punch it myself. Arr, 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 arr.